Hello and welcome to our Bible study on Ezekiel. Today we'll be looking at chapters 40 to 43, where God is giving Ezekiel a vision of what the new temple is going to look like. Let me give you a little background. Ezekiel is currently living in Babylon. He has been exiled there because all of Israel, or a good portion of it, would be exiled as slaves into the Babylonian Empire. At this point, Jerusalem is about to fall, and the temple that the nation had worshipped on, had been a center part of their culture, was about to be destroyed. And with that, let's get into Ezekiel. First, I'm Pastor Mike Robelch, and I'll be leading the Bible study on the prophet Ezekiel. I'm one of the pastors at Peace Lutheran Church in Pico Rivera and the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in North Long Beach. If you would like to submit a question regarding the study, please contact us by email at peaceluthch@gmail.com, or you may send a DM at either or two Facebook pages. Now, getting into Ezekiel, let's start with the first four verses. In the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th of the month, in the 14th year after the city was taken, on that same day, the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he brought me there. In the visions of God, he brought me into the land of Israel and set me on a very high mountain. And on it to the south, there was a structure like a city. So he brought me there, and behold, there was a man whose appearance was like that of bronze, with a line of flax and a measuring rod in his hand. And he was standing in the gateway, and the man said to me, Son of man, see with your eyes, hear with your ears, and give attention to all that I'm going to show you. For you have been brought here in order to show it to you. Declare to the house of Israel all that you see. Well, let's take a moment and consider a couple things. In verse 1, Ezekiel gives us sort of 3 points to locate us where in time he is. It's the 25th year of our exile. And notice that he's saying not Israel's exile, but he's including himself. He's identifying with the people. At the beginning of the year, on the 10th of the month, in the 14th year after the city was taken. So Jerusalem has fallen. And at this time of the year, the 10th of the month, we're talking about the month of Nisan. And that is when the Passover lambs would be selected for sacrifice. And keep that in your mind as we go through this. And so in this vision, God takes Ezekiel from Babylon, and in the vision, he takes him to the land of Israel. Now, he says there, and there was a structure like a city. He doesn't name it as Jerusalem, but he is about to give Ezekiel some instruction. And there is a man there whose appearance was like the appearance of bronze. You might remember that we saw a person described like this twice before in the book. First, I am seated on God's throne. And the second time when, let's see, what was the second time? I just had brain freeze. It'll come to me. But there are two interpretations. First interpretation is that this is the pre-incarnate Christ. And, there's nothing to dissuade us from that. Or the second interpretation is that it could also be an angel or a created being, something in that order. But he has two things in his hands. He has a line of flax, and that is used to measure long distances. And he also has a measuring rod, something like you and I would call a yardstick. Or I guess if you're in any other or most other countries, a meter stick. But it is used for measuring short distances. And so he is instructing Ezekiel to take down these measurements. And behold, there was a wall on the outside of the temple all around. In the man's hand was a measuring rod of 6 cubits, each of which was a cubit and a handbreadth. So he measured the thickness of the wall, 1 rod, and the height, 1 rod. Then he went to the gate which faced east, went up its steps, and measured the threshold of the gate, 1 rod in width, and the other threshold was 1 rod in width. And the guard room was 1 rod long and 1 rod wide. And there were 5 cubits between the guard rooms. And the threshold of the gate by the porch of the gate facing inward was 1 rod. Then he measured the porch of the gate facing inward, 1 rod. And he measured the porch of the gate 8 cubits and its side pillars 2 cubits. And the porch of the gate was facing inward. And the guard rooms of the gate toward the east numbered 3 on each side, and 3 of them had the same measurement. The side pillars also had the same measurements on each side. And so he measured the width of the gateway, 10 cubits, and the length of the gate, 13 cubits. And there was a barrier wall, 1 cubit wide in front of the guard rooms on each side. And the guard rooms were 6 cubit squares on each side. And he measured the gate from the roof of one guard room to the roof of the other, a width of 25 cubits from one door to the door opposite. And he made 6 pillars, 60 cubits high, and the gate exceeded round about to the side pillar of the courtyard. And from the front of the entrance gate to the front of the inner porch of the gate was 50 cubits. And there were shuttered windows looking toward the guard rooms, and toward their side pillars within the gate all around, and likewise for the porches. And there were windows all around inside, and each side pillar were palm ornaments. And he brought me to the inner court, and behold, there were chambers and a pavement made for the court all around. 30 chambers faced the pavement, and the pavement, that is the lower pavement, was by the side of the gates, corresponding to the length of the gates. Then he measured the width of the front of the lower gate to the front of the exterior of the inner court, 100 cubits on the east and on the north. Now, this description goes on for about 21 more verses. And for the length of brevity, we're going to ignore that. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a representation on this. So what is happening is that this description is now laying out a smaller, less grand temple than the Babylonians had destroyed. If you look at the center of the drawing, where you see the letters L and M, that is the physical temple. M is the Holy of Holies. That's where the Ark of the Covenant would be. That's where the presence of God's glory would reside. Now, remember, early on, God's presence had left the temple, and he allowed the Babylonians to raise it. And so we see that, you come in from the lower part of the drawing, from the east gate, you come into the outer courtyards. And then you go up a series of inner gates to what is known as the inner courtyard. And then from the inner courtyard, you would go into the temple. The letter L would be the nave, and that is very, very similar to the way our churches are laid out. That's where you walk in to your pew to sit down. And the Holy of Holies would equate to the altar area in most churches. Now, in around the temple courts, they had rooms for worshipers that were the C rooms that you see around the outer periphery. You also will see that they had kitchens, and those are marked by a letter T, and you'll see that at the upper part of the drawing, flanking both sides. Now you might ask, why do they have kitchens? Now remember, when Israel gathered once a year to make sacrifices for the entire nation, they slaughtered all sorts of animals, bulls, rams, sheep, doves, all sorts of things. And so part of the portion that God had given the priest was they got a portion of the meat. So that's what the kitchens were for. It is to prepare the priest meals. Now, somebody had asked in a Bible study not too long ago, well, with all this sacrifice, how do they get rid of all the leftovers? And if you'll notice that flowing through the inner courtyard, H, into the outer courtyard, the D, there's a stream of water. And remember that the temple is built on the Temple Mount, so the water is flowing from the temple building out and going downhill. So that stream is fed by a fresh spring that was under the temple. Now there are sacristies on each side of the temple, and those are the letter Q in the drawing. But this gives you an idea of what Ezekiel is being told to measure and how to lay this out. And again, I want to emphasize this wasn't as magnificent as the previous temple, but it still would be the center of worship for the Jewish nation. And here is a close-up of the temple itself. C being the Holy of Holies, again, B is the nave, and then you had these inner rooms that would be used for both worshipers and priests. So this is what Ezekiel was being given, and he would transmit this so that the people of Israel would have this to go on when they eventually got back to Israel. Now, remember, Jeremiah had forecasted that they'd only be gone 72 years. So there was, based on what we saw in the first 5 verses of this chapter, they were roughly through the halfway through the, but not quite halfway through the exile period. Now, it was coincidentally right halfway point between a Jubilee year. And the Jubilee year has a very special meaning in the Jewish religion. In a Jubilee year, if your family had lost their land in foreclosure, it would be given back to you. Now, Jubilee years are 50 years apart. So you lost it or your parents lost it, it would come back to your family. There's this connotation of liberty, of freedom. The obligation is removed from you. And we see that Jesus uses the same language when he talks about himself being the Lamb of God. that he would bring freedom or liberty to the people. And so this would resonate to the Jew very, very strongly. We read it and go, okay, liberty, yeah, we understand that. But to the Jew, that really meant something important. The final point I want to make tonight is that who is this individual that appears in bronze? There are two schools of thought. One is that it's the pre-incarnate Jesus. The second thought is that it is a high-ranking angel. If it's a high-ranking angel, okay, does that have any significance for us? Other than we see this heavenly creature is assisting Ezekiel in measuring this temple. The other question is, if this is the pre-incarnate Christ, does that change how this vision is perceived by you and me? And the answer probably to the second question is yes. If this is the pre-incarnate Christ, then yes, this does have a very significant meaning to us, because he'd be talking about a new temple, a new church, if you will, the church of all believers. You remember on Maundy, Thursday, when Jesus instituted Holy Communion, he said, here, drink this blood of the new covenant, a new contract, one that is based in belief, not in the genetic inheritance from the parent received from parents. And this is something that is very, very significant, is that this is a foretelling of Jesus installing a new covenant with the people. He would be the sacrifice to end all sacrifices. So with that, I'll leave you to think on that. If you want, read chapters 40, 41, and 42. It goes into inglorious detail all about this. And, it's something that most people do not, it's not salvational, but it is interesting on how they laid this out. Anyway, I hope and pray that you've been edified tonight, and we hope to see you in another study. We do have in-person services and Bible studies at Peace Lutheran Church and St. John. At Peace, we worship at 9 and 11. Our 11 a.m. service is in Spanish. We're located at 9412 in Shade Lane in Pico Rivera. And in Long Beach, St. John's is located at 6698 Orange Avenue. And our service is at 12:30 p.m. and followed by our Bible study. And then we have our ASL signing available at that service. So may God bless you and your study. Take care until next time. Thank you.